The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today, we're going into part 3 of a trilogy. The person at the center of it is named Rita with an H, and we entitled her chapter in book 3, Rita and Afterlife Rehab. I only met Rita after her death, so I wasn't part of her life when she was struggling with the addiction that eventually was the cause of her death. So my remarks today are going to be about the part of her that she shared with me and with us because of the book. The part of her experience that was healing after her death. Catholics think of that as purgatorial. Purge means to cleanse. That's one way of thinking of a way that we heal and grow, is to clean. Sometimes I'll talk about the importance of cleaning a wound, lest it just fester. And sometimes I've been with people that are dealing with either grief because of the death of a loved one or some other brokenheartedness in their life, and they're churning away at grieving, but it's seeming to do so in a way that is unproductive or even counterproductive. And sometimes I'll challenge them and say, it seems to me there's dirt in the wound. Could we clean this out? Could we get rid of some idea that's causing this ongoing upset? Anyway, the third part of the trilogy, we first tell the story, which we did 2 episodes ago. Then last time we looked at that story with regard to compassionate response. How does it make me feel when I hear her story? This time, we're going to be focused on spiritual practices that might be helpful, that are in some way related to this story. As a presenter, a public speaker, a preacher, in this case, a podcaster, sometimes I have very sequential logic. The way that, do you remember learning how to make a topical outline, maybe in middle school? How to figure out what are the most important things you want to say and what order to say them in, where there are like titles, subtitles, what fits where. Sometimes I speak like that and think like that, and I find it very satisfying when I can go into giving a talk or a retreat or a homily, knowing that I've got all my ducks in a row. And I admire that when I see it in other people. And other people who do that routinely have PowerPoint presentations where they've obviously thought this all through. They took the time to categorize it, and they can push a button and up it comes on a screen, the next thing they're going to say. I just am not like that. It's not that I can't do that, because I have. It's not my native land. I'm bringing that up because I feel like today I might be a little more meandering than normal, and just thought that full disclosure, just as you're beginning to watch this episode, so that I want to put that out there. I'm making a choice to address myself to loved ones who have lost someone to death because of an addiction. A book or a podcast, the internet, you never know exactly who your audience is, but before you write or speak, you need to kind of try to imagine who they are. And because Rita didn't involve us in the part of her story that was active in rehab on Earth, she didn't tell us what her drug of choice was, how she moved into alcohol or drug abuse. She didn't tell us any of that. So I just feel like that's for another time. What she did tell us about was what it was like for her near the end of her life. She also told us a lot about what healing was like in her afterlife. If you've watched or read the material that my prayer partners and I have made available, or if you've been watching this or listening to this podcast, you know that we receive a dream. I receive a dream often of someone's violent death. This case, Rita did not show me that. Remember, she showed me this odd scene of being in a car with her elder parents with a Christmas present in her lap, but the whole thing was sad. Well, she explained that they had created a little dinner party just for the three of them, where there would be a Christmas gift exchange in the days right before Christmas. And then they told her that she would not be invited to the larger extended family Christmas party because we want to have a Christmas celebration without your addictions. Of course, she was hurt, but she also said all they were doing was creating firmer boundaries because my addictions had caused lots of pain to lots of people. And so she showed us that. And then, as it turned out, she died a few months later. But I'm going to focus on what she told us about the healing that has happened for her since her passing. As you know, my prayer partners, I think of ourselves as being the discharge staff in a medical center or some sort of therapeutic afterlife spa thing, some level where people get exactly what they need in order to come into full freedom, uh, such that they can choose what they want to do. For people who believe in heaven, the joys of heaven presume um, choosing to do something, and maybe out of a universe of options. Well, that's only helpful if you're healthy and free to do that. And sometimes people need a boost getting there. And that was the case for Rita. So, one of the things that I've found in this work all along is the importance of moving toward deeper and deeper truth, clarity about what's real. The order that I belong to, the Dominican order, the order of preachers, our motto is Veritas, which is just Latin for truth. It's a keystone for us. So I've been a member of the order now. It'll be 45 years very soon. So having truth as a pivot point, a focus, has been a lifelong thing for me. So always, and not presuming that you know the truth because you are who you are and you have opinions and your opinion is the true because you thought it and all that. It's just nonsense to believe that everything that your every opinion is true just because you think it is. That truth always involves humility and the ability to grow in truth sometimes means to set aside some previous certainty so that there's room for an evolving truth, a newer truth. The scientific method moves that way, that there can be a consensus that this is that in some field of study. Somebody comes along and creates a different research model or a different thesis, and they prove something new that might be completely do away with a previous uh, thesis, or it might just send it in a new direction. So truth, truth, truth. Rita she came back to that. She told us that she landed in something like a spa that was a rehab, and she had been in 3 residential rehabs, but she said she had to watch other people leave them and graduate into good health and freedom from addiction. She was 3 different times her rehab stays came to an end, but she said it was always because of money and insurance. And they tried to put the best face on it to tell her, remind her of all the progress that she'd made. But she said, I knew deep down that I was still addicted. Well, in the afterlife, she needed to move through to truth. Um, One thing about it that I've learned over time is that an important facet of addiction is embodied in cells that are screaming out for a drug of choice. And so your own body is screaming to have the thing that it craves, even if it's self-destructive. Well, that goes away when you leave the body, but you don't leave all of it at all. I mean, there's still plenty of things about addiction that move into the next life. At least that's what I've seen. And before you think of that as terrible, depressing news, I just think it's a simple truth. But what Rita told us was here, they never had to experiment or try things on me. Everything they recommended that I do was immediately fruitful. I could see that everything they asked of me was helping me progress. And she said that created in me hope that I had gotten used to not having. She was more inclined to think that if she made any kind of progress, it would be temporary and then there'd be a setback because she experienced that. And she said her loved ones once in a while got to see her in brief periods of sobriety, but they were always kind of on eggshells about how long before she relapses. And so it was hard for her to maintain hope. But she said in her afterlife experience, she was surrounded by compassionate, loving people with a professionalism about caring for someone who had the needs that she did, but she saw progress all the while. I told you I was going to meander a bit, and one of the things that I feel like it's important to bring in is a truth that I think is essential about all of us and about the universe that we inhabit. I believe every human person um, is made in the image of God. All of us are good deep down in our bones, in our fingernails, in our hair. We just are good because we're from good. That can be difficult to believe if you've been taught otherwise, especially in childhood. If you picked up messages along the way that you're not as good as, or not good enough, or even worse, that you're bad or you're trash or whatever, that there's some reason that you ought to be hated. It's just not true. You are good. Everyone is made good. I have frequently go back to Thomas Aquinas, in whom I'm schooled, and he taught that God still loves Satan because Satan is his child, and that God is nothing but love, and that even Satan's existence, the fact that he is part of God's creation. That might be mind blowing for you. It's just something that I'm used to. I don't look at anybody in whatever condition and assume they're evil. They might have committed evil and even atrocious acts, but I will not say that anyone's evil because I don't believe it's true. And Rita struggled as she saw the impact of her addiction on loved ones and coworkers and stuff. But again, she didn't give us an awful lot of detail about that part of her life. Most of the detail was about her afterlife. So uh, that's where I'm spending more of my time. If you love somebody who has died in addiction, especially if they're your child, can you reset your imagination to hope that it's true that we survive our deaths, and it's true that we have the opportunity to heal and grow after we die? Could it be possible that you get to see your son or daughter, your loved one, whoever they are, in the whole happy version of themselves that you might have gotten a glimpse of at some point? Many times we'll have a relationship with somebody before they became addicted to something, where we knew them as carefree and happy, and uh, any other attributes that you want to put that are positive. But then we saw them begin to slip into addictions that then were lied about. Rita stole from her parents, or where they somehow brought sadness and confusion or chaos. Sometimes when people die in addiction, parents or spouses, loved ones, kids, they hardly have anything to choose from in the previous 10 years. They can't remember a time when he or she was whole and happy, or they really have to work at it. If that's the case for you, um, I want to encourage you to put on a new mind, to try again. I believe that Rita even told us, she said near the near the end, uh, she was confident that the version of herself that was emerging in her healing was the version of herself that her family would have been happy to have at Christmas dinner. It's just that the addictions just messed up everything. She told us that she had a certain story about herself that she told, and her guardian, Earl, her guardian angel, who loved her, and she knew that, would say, "Yes, Rita, what you said is true to a point, but do you remember this? You're telling the story this way, but this also happened. Do you remember that?" And she told us that whenever her guardian would speak a truth to her that was contradictory or that seemed like a rebuke, she said he always did it with such love that I was not offended. I just received it as a truth. He even said about her, Earl, her guardian said, she has a great capacity for receiving the truth, which is remarkable for somebody that lived in addiction. But she did. And she said, when he would say something to me, and when I was exaggerating a story in a way that moved away from truth, he would say, well, that's true to a point, but what about this other part? Do you remember that? One of the things I remember being taught early on in philosophy classes when I had joined the order was that truth has a definitive nature. Truth has a definitive nature. It's not always just a matter of opinion, your truth and my truth. For example, um, I grew up in Groves, Texas, the home of the Pecan Festival. I'm not from France. I've never been there. If you want to say of me, Father Nathan Castle is from France, you can say that if you want. It's just not true. You could get an entire, um, I don't know, throng, mob, crowd to agree with you that I'm from France. And you might feel more and more emboldened because so many people agree with you about this statement. But truth has a definitive nature. You can gather all the people you want to assert that I am from France, and it's still not true. It's just not. Many things have a definitive nature like that, and it really isn't a matter of opinion. It's just a standalone truth. Well, Rita had a great capacity for truth, we're told by her own guardian. And when she heard something that challenged a pre-existing story in her head, she had the humility and the good sense to shift the story to better accord with the truth. Why keep telling yourself a story that is untrue or at least exaggerated to a point where it's moving away from truth? It'll only make you unhappy and others unhappy. She just began to see she wanted to know why she was addicted to begin with, which is a great starting place. I think I've done psychotherapy a couple of times as the patient, the recipient of other people's care, and I've also done a lot of pastoral counseling throughout my career. That's the way I've done it, is try to say, well, what's the truth of this? And sometimes, is there an origin of where this trouble started? Uh, can I get down to uh, uh, beginnings? Very often, things that are important to us, like healing from addiction in Rita's case, have more than one cause. And so there's a cluster of things. One of them might be much more important than several other things around it. But she was brought to the knowledge that she said, well, when I focused on that and my helpers assisted me, they did say that there were some biochemical markers, there were some genetic predispositions and stuff. That didn't mean she was going to become an addict, but we're familiar with that, aren't you? Don't you know that's the thing, that some people might be more and prone, and that kind of thing can go through a family line. There was a little bit of that. But she also said uh, they they helped me see that when my sister Brenda died in a bicycle accident, hit by a car, when Rita was 6, only 1 year younger, she said, our house changed. You would think that that's such an important event in the life of a person and of a child that you would think, well, that has to be a part of an ongoing story later on, but she didn't really see it that way. But when she went back into her history, she said, I remember what it felt like in the years that followed, that her parents hollowed out inside. They were so brokenhearted at the loss of their daughter that they were less emotionally available or almost unavailable to Rita. They just didn't have it to give anymore. They were hollowed out by Brenda's death. She said, I was only 6, but I began to understand that I needed to emotionally raise myself. I was fed and clothed and housed, but that was about where it ended. Well, so there was a hole in her that that needed to be filled. She said they also showed me how it was something like a weed that started in one place, but it sent out spores to other places. And then before long, there's a little something going on over here and a little over here and a little over here. So she was able to see, uh, I don't know, the big picture of her life, and one thing that led to another. That doesn't mean it had to, the one thing had to lead to the next, but it did, you know. So she began to understand herself and could have compassion for herself. She could have compassion for her parents. She wasn't angry at them for emotional abandonment. She felt bad for them because she experienced the same loss that they did in a different way. That she was a member of that family who lost a loved one. Well, I want to shift now to um, what you might be able to do now if you love somebody that died in addiction. One thing I would challenge is uh, thinking in terms of win or lose, winner or loser, uh, success, failure. Rita failed at rehab 3 times. And you could look at her life and say it was a failure. She wasn't even housed at the time she died. She she didn't go into much detail, but she was missing work a lot, and I think she was unhoused when she died and took a street drug that she said was obviously unregulated, and that was her death. Uh, you could just look at her story and say, she was a failure. Well, you know what I would do with that is I follow a failure. I'm a follower of Jesus who died on a cross. There's one in the background over there, right there. Um, on Good Friday, the people that knew him best lied and said they'd never heard of him. Most of them ran away because they were afraid what was happening to him would happen to them. We have one scene in John's gospel where his mother is there with a few lady friends. There's in that story, that telling of the story, there's one beloved disciple who's there at the foot of the cross. But that's only one version. And Mark's version of it, they all ran away. He uses the Greek word panta, meaning all. They all ran away, and he repeats it again and again. Well, anyway, Good Friday, which it's astounding that Christians call that good, but that's but we do because we believe that even in the worst of times, God's activity, God's presence, and God's activity are still there. And um, so when I have in my life felt like I was failing at a thing, I try to step back from it and uh, incline my heart to the one who failed on Good Friday. If Jesus's mission was to bring everyone home to the Father, it surely didn't look like that when they were taking his body down off the cross. And earlier, there had been mobs screaming for his crucifixion. If you love somebody whose life appeared at the end to be a failure, I want to offer the possibility that there's could be another way to look at that. It's heartbreaking, no question, But if you believe, as I do, that everyone survives their death, there's still more to the story. Okay, you can have a chapter ending that ended in failure, but there's a next chapter. That's what Rita was telling us. She said, yeah, she didn't call herself a failure, but you could infer that if you wanted to. She just said, I died in addiction and I woke up over here. And then there were people here to help me, and they were effective in their helping, and I got better. All the way to the point where I'm now able to do this crossing thing that you people help do. We always ask in a second time their permission to use their story publicly. And when we did, she gave us an update and told us a little bit more. She had been engaged to help some other people a little bit. She knew, she was familiar with the 12 steps of AA and the way that an AA or a narcotics and NA group might work. She said, I never got enough sobriety to be trusted to be a sponsor, somebody that could be relied upon in the middle of the night to help a sponsee. She never got that, but she said that didn't mean I couldn't boost a person. I think she even used that example. Do you remember from childhood, cupping your hand so that somebody could step there to look over a fence or a wall? Um, she said, I was able to do a little bit of that, and I've done some of that in the afterlife. But she said, my team has told me, you've had enough of rehabs. You've had enough of addiction. We think it would be best for you to just choose something fun. So she took that advice. She did say that she would be honored. She knows that she can be spoken to in prayer, and she could hear me when I prayed to her. She said, I can hear it when people call on me in whatever they call prayer. That just has to come from the heart, and it has to be directed to me. That's all. Uh, so she said, I can hear it when people call out to me in prayer. And if they want me to be a part of a team for somebody that they love, I'd be honored. So it wouldn't be that she has to go headlong into being, in professional rehab work. But she said, I'd be honored. I'd be a part of anybody's team that wanted me to be a part of it. If you're not a person that has a structured prayer life, call it whatever you want, quiet time, meditation. Uh, I recommend doing something at the start of the day when, especially if you can figure out a way to have quiet at the start of the day. Not everybody lives in a quiet household. I didn't for a long time. But can you carve out something at the beginning of the day before you get too involved in the details and the to-do lists? Can you can you have some sort of morning quietude where you get to choose from your heart what you want to do? And if you love somebody that died in addiction, could you say hello at the beginning of the day without it being sad? Just saying, hey, I'm hopeful that you uh, are doing better, and I want to send you this well wish or this blessing. Everybody can offer a blessing. Um, I sometimes go for walks. I've never liked gyms. I've tried gym memberships any number of times, and I recently got rid of a useless stationary bike that sat outside my door, neglected. I don't like that, but I do like walking. And one of the things, in the 12-step program, it's steps, which involves walking or a metaphor of walking. So sometimes I'll set an intention, even though I'm just going to walk for half an hour in the cool of the morning. I'll set an intention and say, on this walk, I want every step to be uh, some sort of advancement or forward motion or healing for this person. Do you get that? You don't have to think of them every moment while you're on your walk. You can stop and smell the roses, enjoy the scenery, say hello to other people. Um, Listen to a podcast. A lot of people do that. But you could set an intention at the beginning of your walk that I want this time to somehow benefit my loved one, step by step by step. That's one thing. Over in one side of my room, when I do a podcast, I have a little candle that I light. It just In the Catholic tradition, we light candles, and sometimes churches will have a bank of candles where you can go in and drop a quarter in a box and light a candle that's an intention for somebody that you you say a prayer as you light this candle. And I was taught, as a little child when we had that in our church, that that prayer would continue as the candle gave off light until it went out. That's a thing you could do. Create some practice of your own where you're hopeful that the person that you love that died in addiction could still improve. Or maybe by the time you die, and if you want to be reunited with them and ask for that, maybe you get to see what's sometimes called the glorified version of them that's freed. Um, Again, going back to the Catholic idea of purgatory, one of the ways it's defined is that it's a place to um, detach from some sort of unhelpful, unholy attachment. You know, think of something like a barnacle. Sometimes I describe it as Velcro, where sometimes if you harbor resentment, it's like you have Velcro on the outside of you that's remembering the last time somebody offended you, and you're on high alert to be ready to be offended by the next incoming insult. Um, uh, that kind of sometimes we get attached to something or an idea that is unhelpful for us, and that the purgatorial process, the cleansing process, uh, helps that fall away like a scab. Anyway, what I'm hopeful for in this spiritual practice episode in this trilogy is that if you love somebody that's died in addiction, that you can hold out hope that the way that you saw them near the end is not the way that you'll see them the next time. That you'll get to see the version of them that was more like their original version when they got here as a beloved child of God. Um, Maybe you go back to photographs if you can do that without being sad and think, I remember when he or she was joyful and carefree and full of joy and anticipation about their life. And even if there was a period where it all went dark, hold out hope that there can be a reset. There can be a next chance. There can be a next opportunity in God's universe for you to get to see the whole, healed, happy version, free version of somebody that uh, that you only knew in addiction. Maybe I'll end with this. When it was time for Rita to make the passage, she did compare it to leaving a rehab. She said, it's just that this time I'm actually healed. I'm I'm free. And you people are helping me from here onto something greater. And when it was time for her to ask for somebody to come for her and accompany her, in her mind, there was no doubt it needed to be Brenda, the sister that she hadn't seen since she was 6. And then Brenda, instead of being a proper young girl from the 50s, I think, wearing a dress on a bicycle, uh, she came instead on what I think was one of those three-wheeled all-terrain vehicles and pants. And I think Rita said, it's not a tricycle, but it's something that you take out in some wilderness and what did she say? Roar about and kick up dust. She said, I didn't know my sister's wild side, and we were too young to know each other really well anyway. So I'm going to get to know her, but I'm going to get to know whatever it is she wants me to know about her. But at least at the front end, it's going to involve a little wild ride. So maybe you can borrow from that. And maybe if you do any kind of quietude, any sort of meditative prayer, ask the person you love, may I see a version of you that's a future version of you that uh, that you're either already living or that you have hope you can, and show it to me. Just let your imagination move in that direction, and live in joyful hope that the person that you have loved through the illness of addiction, even to death, uh, that something new can come alive in them. Uh, so I'm going to stop with that. I hope you find that helpful. If you want to go into this story in greater detail, it's in Afterlife Interrupted, Book 3, which is over my shoulder. It's chapter 9, Rita and Afterlife Rehab. Well, as always, if there's something that I can do for you, the easiest way to contact me is through my website, nathan-castle.com. I ask that you've at least read one of my books before asking me a question about this work, because there just aren't enough hours in the day to explain what I've already explained, and the books are easily available on Amazon. Even the most recent one, this one is now available as an audiobook. So it can be an e-reader book, a paper book, or an audiobook. And then remember that I'm praying for you. I pray for all of you who listen or watch this podcast, and I pray that that God, who knows you through and through, will help healing ooze into wherever it needs to, and that you can live in joyful hope and move through a day contributing love to people around you. So that's it for now. Thanks for being with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.